Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Collage Live Online. I am Rick Cassini-Cador, the editor of Collage Magazine and your host for the event. Today, we head to Pollitt, Vermont, where we are visiting the studio and outdoor gallery of EveNSteve Schaub. And we want to hear from you. We encourage you to use the chat. Let us know your questions, and we will relay them to EveNSteve. And you can use the raise the hand function or simply post a question in chat, and always feel free to chat with one another. Stephen and Eve Schaub met at the Rochester Institute of Technology's photography program in 1995. In 2019, they formed EveNSteve and began collaborating on monumental artworks that incorporate both photographic imagery and handwritten text. Eve is the best-selling author of The Year of No Sugar and The Year of No Clutter, and she is currently working on her third and finally family project memoir, A Year of No Garbage. Steve Schaub's artworks have been described as art dreaming about itself. In his Vermont studio, Stephen combines monumentality of scale with light-sensitive techniques and the presentation of works on paper to create each unique work of art. He often uses in-camera collage, where he will expose an entire roll of film to create one single work. His works have been exhibited around the world, recently in Singapore, Miami, and at the Artist Book Foundation at Mass MoCA in North Adams, Massachusetts. His work Stop was included in the exhibition Revolutionary Paths that took place at Antenna Gallery during the first Collage Fest New Orleans, and is in the book that followed that exhibition. So let's go to EveNSteve in Vermont. Hello, EveNSteve. Can we hear you?
Can you hear us?
Rick, can you hear us now?
Can you hear us okay?
We can hear you beautifully.
There
it's a nice
we
day
go.
there.
Well, welcome to the hayfield.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks
for everything. Thank you. And hello, everyone watching.
Yes.
And we're delighted to be able to bring you to our Hayfield Art Gallery, which all began as a result of the pandemic and the quarantine.
Eve and I, like many artists, had lots of exhibitions scheduled for the next year, year and a half. And the moment everything shut down, so did all of our shows. They're either being canceled or postponed. So we decided it was important to find a way to reach out to our community, to our family, and to our friends.
In a way that would still be safe for people to, we feel very strongly that seeing works of art in person is the very best possible way to engage with art. So we wanted to make it possible for people to see art in person, but still do it safely. And that's when we looked across the street and we said, we have this gigantic hayfield. We just have to make our work really big so people can see it as they drive down our road. And then as things progressed, we put in a path. We made it possible for people to walk through the field if they want. But all of this is to an end of reaching out to our community during a very unusual time.
So the first piece that we made, I should first say that most of our works are very large, whether they're indoors or outdoors. Most of the pieces span 20, 30, 40 feet. This first piece, though, is 10 feet wide. And it's amazing when you put a 10-foot wide artwork in a gigantic hayfield.
It changes completely.
It completely becomes very small instantly. And one thing I know that was important to you, Eve, was the text that you put on this piece.
So this is the very first work that we made to put outside in the hayfield. And it reads, "My heart is very big. Sometimes I wonder if it is big enough." This work was speaking to very much the issues of isolation, of fear, of anxiety, during this very unusual time when it was just beginning. So we can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, as we move to the next piece.
You want to move to the next piece?
Yeah, let's move to the next
so this
piece.
is the very first one. And
one thing I think is important too is that Eve and I, for a long time, have been talking about doing large outdoor artworks like this. And the pandemic gave us the perfect excuse to make this work and to experiment with it.
Well, it was almost like, oh, well, now we have to go do it.
Right.
You know?
So we're
like
very much
no better opportunity than right now.
And we're very much considering it like a lab experiment. We've recently installed an artwork at the Bennington Museum on the front lawn, and you don't want to install something 13 feet high like this piece and not have it work. So we spent a lot of time.
So we've been sort of fleshing out our strategy every time we make one of these works. Right now in our field, we have a total of 4 works. We ultimately plan for there to be 5 in total. They're all temporary. And
Right.
that was another big concern for us because we're used to working in a way that's very long-term. You know, we want our work to last generations. We were also used to working within the gallery space, the museum space, the white box.
Perfect light,
very
perfect temperature.
controlled.
Yeah.
And this was the complete opposite of that. This is whole lots of variables that are very unpredictable. You have to work really big. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
Is it going to rain? Is there going to be a typhoon? You have to plan, and you have to assume that the weather's going to do its work on your piece, and it's going to change and evolve over time.
Exactly. So the title of this piece, Eve?
This is called Two Strong Girls. The models in the piece are our 2 daughters.
And I think that's important to know too, that really over the last 15 plus years, I've been using our family, our 2 daughters and Eve, as models and subjects in the vast majority of what I make.
So the text on the piece reads, "There were 2 strong girls who lived by a lake. One was water, the other air."
And I think this sort of gets to the way that Eve and I work. We primarily make 3 different styles of work. We make work that's history inspired, site specific, or a narrative, a fiction. And some of these pieces are a combination of all 3.
Sometimes they're a combination of those categories. This one in particular, I was thinking of it, again, we're during a time of isolation, pandemic, quarantine, and I was thinking a lot about fairy tales, about the language that we use, about sort of constructing a new way of talking about
the stories
things.
We tell ourselves.
Yes, exactly. So I was thinking a lot about, you know, telling this story that sort of would be like an allegory.
Yeah, and then putting this piece in because it's so tall. The first time we had a 50-mile-an-hour wind gust.
We were a little nervous.
Yeah, but it's worked out okay, so that's really exciting. So let's walk on down to the next piece. One thing is that I work exclusively in film for the creations of my artwork. And you can hear the cars going by that are going by the drive-by art gallery here. And so I work with a variety of different cameras, from handmade custom one-of-a-kind cameras to massive panoramic cameras like 6 by 24 centimeters. I just find that there's a organic, beautiful quality to film that I don't see in digital capture with digital cameras. And so on this next piece, I chose to work with a pinhole camera called the orthotoposcope, and it's the only one in the world. It's a 6 by 12 centimeter camera, and I'm working with what are called non-optimized pinholes. So it creates this rounded sort of beautiful quality, and the color that we have in the piece, you'll notice it's very vibrant and very rich. And the reason for that is that I'm doing a cross-process technique where it's using different chemicals to alter sort of the color palette of the work. And my favorite part about this work to date, beyond the fact that I do love this piece, is the fact that the birds have begun to crap on the surface of my artwork. And, you know, after 30 years of working in a perfect white cube with perfect
Very
lighting,
controlled environment.
yeah, this is something to get used to, the idea that you're not in charge and you're not in control of the work.
I think it's upsetting, but at the same time, it's very free.
It's very healthy.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this piece reads, "I keep happiness in a jar by the side of my bed." And this was speaking at the time, for me, I was thinking a lot about trying to make the things that are intangible tangible.
Yeah.
And wanting, again, to sort of make a new language for ourselves. I wanted to take good feelings and save them in a very physical way during this unusual and anxiety-provoking time.
One of the other things too about this piece is we were able to be very site specific in terms of the installation. So you can notice that the tree that's within the artwork continues to the tree that's within the field.
I don't know if people can see that in the long shot.
I think they can.
That the tree can line up.
And that was something that we very much thought about. We've been thinking a lot about how we want people to relate to the work into the field. And it's just sort of a balance that we're sort of trying to strike. So let's move on to our next piece, which let's talk a little about the idea of monuments to now.
Yeah, so at the same time that all of these events were unfolding very rapidly with regards to the virus, the pandemic, and safety measures, at the same time you have the explosion then right after of Black Lives Matter, and the big discussion going on about monuments and what role monuments play in society, in our culture, And
we started thinking about the idea, should there be monuments that last forever? What about the idea of monuments to now? Monuments that are meant to live for a short period of time, but that speak to ultra-specific current events.
so that brings us to our fourth and largest work that's in the field.
This was a massive piece to install. We're coming up on it now, so we'll wait till we get up to a little bit closer. One thing that I am happy about is when we place these pieces in the field, we wanted the grass to grow up underneath the pieces, so eventually they would feel like they were floating in the field, which is starting to happen with the high hay. So this particular piece is called Your Skin Contains Me. It's the largest piece that we've done. It is 32 feet wide. Out of the ground, it's almost 8 feet tall. It was very much sort of an Amish barn building.
Okay, we had everybody in the family out here, plus some other people, and everyone was pushing it. We have a wonderful video on our website, EveNSteve.com, that documents the whole process, and it really was like a barn raising. It was incredible. It's been a really wonderful experience, just as a side note, for our family to come together. There goes the tractor. For our family to come together and sort of be collaborating on these projects together, because not only Steve and I are collaborating, but you know, the whole family is modeling for the posing for the
our daughter's
images.
boyfriend Stephen's in this piece.
They're helping with the painting and the construction and, you know, hoisting the thing up.
So this particular piece is truly an in-camera collage on film. It spans an entire roll of 120 film. I'm using the river, which is the Meadowy River in our community, that runs from our downtown to our property, which is 4.7 miles away. And then that river eventually continues to the Atlantic Ocean as sort of a way of talking about how the river connects our community and our voice within the community, and how our voice, exactly. And this is 7 frames in camera, overlapping frames, so it's an in-camera collage. So the overlapping frame technique that you're seeing here is done in camera and not on in Photoshop. And you can see these lines here within the piece. That's the overlapping frames of film. So when you're creating a piece like this, you're very much consciously thinking, as best as you can at least, how the different images are going to combine and how the content from one to the other tells this continuous yet fragmented story that kind of has the logic of a dream.
Well, one of the ways I like to describe these works is that they are imaginary pictures of real places. So it's a landscape that doesn't exist in this particular way anywhere, but it's taken from a variety of different sources and put together to form one continuous image.
Right, right. And I think that, why don't you talk a little bit, Eve, about the text?
Okay, so that's where for us, the collage element comes in.
Talk to Ilsa.
Okay, sorry. And the text reads, I will speak by the river. I will sing on my knees. Your skin contains me. It turns gold at night. The text for this was extremely influenced by the explosion of Black Lives Matter and the race riots that were going on, the rallies that were just beginning at the time that we made this work. And in particular, I was listening to NPR and I heard a story about a rally where people had gotten down on their knees and sung together, and they sang the song Lean on Me. And the man who led them in song later described that it was as if everyone had one color skin in that moment. And I was very captivated by that image, and I wanted to include it in this piece. And so that's where the skin turning gold at night comes from, this idea that everybody could be the same hue all at once.
I think the one thing too, before we head into the studio, is talking a little bit about the idea that these pieces are temporary. The idea that, you know, unlike the works that we make in the studio, which you'll see in a minute, which, you know, we work on rare and handmade papers, you know, Egyptian papyrus, amate, gampi, all of these beautiful papers
archival materials.
Archival materials.
These are not.
These are not. We're going to last 4 to 6 months is what we're hoping. And seeing the work in the rain, seeing it in the moonlight, I'm hoping to see it in a snowstorm, is really exciting. And working big on a monumental scale like this, it's one thing to work big and monumental in a white cube, in a gallery, in an institution. And that's great. but I tell you, reimagining your work in something that's out in the open and out in the public.
It's really just, it's been extremely exciting
It
for
has.
us, and it sort of has exploded the borders that we were working within before.
Absolutely. So Rick, I think what we're going to do now is head over to the studio, and we'll reconnect with you in just a few minutes.
That sounds great. And we had a request for some closer look up. So a closer look, I'm going to put some images on the screen as you head over to the studio. And
Ilsa can also walk by too if you would like. Anything in particular that people want to see.
All right.
All right.
We'll talk to you all in a minute.
All right, Rick.
One of the reasons I wanted to include EveNSteve in the Collage Live Online is that I think they are a great example of how artists are going big and taking their work to the next level. The Going Big is a series of articles we're exploring in the magazine and really looking at how artists are scaling up their work and speaking to the sense of spectacle that the broader art world is looking for right now in artwork. And so the series appeared in Collage 28. It continues in the current issue. I also really appreciate how EveNSteve are making work that takes art outside of the museum and gallery system and puts it directly in the community. And I think in these times when we're seeing galleries close and art centers are struggling and artists are really looking for different ways of getting their work out there to the community, that this is an interesting option for folks. I hope people can see what we're viewing on the screen. Ilsa's doing a wonderful job of panning closer on an artwork. And this kind of dreamy lyricism is a hallmark of EveNSteve's work. There's often a lot of blur and a lot of distortion that allows the work to kind of occupy a liminal space for the viewer. As we move inside to the studio, EveNSteve are going to speak about the work A Wonderful Plague, which was a piece that they made just as we were going under lockdown that uses, and I'll let them tell it more fully, but a smallpox cemetery in Cape Cod as a way of exploring themes about how plague is expressed by culture and how disease is expressed in culture. To that end, this is the book launch for a book about that work. Let's see without a glare. And we'll throw a link to this piece in the chat. Also, with your registration, there was a short film made about this work while we were all in quarantine. I would also want to say that this program is in conjunction with Art Meets History, and that's another initiative of that works to build connections between contemporary art and history-focused organizations. The symposiums and through symposiums and talks, we try to promote the idea and the value of art and history working together. And through artist labs and an online directory, we try to connect artists to history organizations. And with this work, we hope to develop exhibitions, curatorial projects, and publications. Our vision is that artists investigate a sense of place and pick up the unfinished work of history and speak to contemporary civic discourse around social, economic, and environmental issues. This last June, we held a pandemic artist lab, and we work and interface with Collage Institute quite a bit. And also this August, we're having another lab that are exploring these issues. And we'll put a link to that initiative in the chat. It looks like EveNSteve are ready to go and in the studio. And so let's cut over to them. And let's talk about the wonderful plague.
All right, so at the very beginning of the pandemic, we weren't doing the works outside quite yet. We wanted to do a work that addressed pandemic as a larger theme. And in particular, Steve had been talking for some time about trying to find a particular smallpox cemetery out in Provincetown,
Yes.
Cape Cod.
Yes. And Provincetown is a place that I visit a great deal, making artwork. I find the light and everything out there engaging. And I think it's important to visit places that you're inspired by again and again and again, because you discover new things on every trip. This was literally right when everything was shut down. The day that I went was the day that Massachusetts shut down all indoor dining.
Yeah,
and
everything was going boom, 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 boom,
right.
boom, one after another.
And I realized that if I didn't go right then,
you might not be able to.
I wasn't going to be able to. Yeah,
yes.
For some time.
So you went racing out
Yep.
there, found the cemetery, which
Yes.
you had never found before because it's all grown over.
Yes.
Not everybody knows where this is. There's no signage. And what did you find?
Well, I went out with the idea of a couple of things. We talked about it beforehand. We were interested in the idea of Provincetown in particular because of the smallpox cemetery, because of HIV/AIDS, because of the isolation that everybody was just starting to go through and the fear, as well as the fact that this is the 400th anniversary this year of the landing of the Mayflower,
yes.
which was in Provincetown.
So this sort of interesting repetition of different plagues throughout history, all having a connection to this same place
Right.
that you have a particular connection to artistically.
Exactly. And so I went out with a 6x24 centimeter camera, which is an incredibly big negative, because I knew I wanted to make these gigantic vertical panels. And each panel is over 6 feet high, and they're printed on Japanese kinwashi, which is a golden paper, is what the translation is. And I was really just sort of trying to photograph what I was inspired by visually, which is very much the way that I work, but also trying to keep in mind, what was important. So the first place that I visited was the smallpox cemetery. And I hope that most of you at this point have had a chance to see the 23-minute movie that we made about this piece, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when I was walking through the forest trying to find the smallpox cemetery, and then I stumbled across it, it was a really humbling experience. I mean, the sense of isolation and fear that I was experiencing, not knowing what was about to happen with COVID-19, this put everything into reality. It was a check of history, sort of.
This has all happened before.
This has happened before.
And scarier. And
scarier, and with a 30% mortality rate. I mean, there was just.
Well, and the fact that it was isolated then, it's isolated now,
it is.
Site, and so hard to find, and very few of the headstones remain, and the headstones that are there do not have names, do not have dates.
They're just simply a number.
They're simply numbered.
Yeah.
Fortunately, after Steve returned home, I did a whole lot of research and was able to find some historical society documents that listed the names of the people who had been buried in the smallpox cemetery. So that was the first piece of text that I wanted to make sure got included in this work.
Right.
And so on this panel here,
well, do we want to go to a close-up?
We can go to a close-up.
Where do you want to start here?
I would like to start.
Okay. So we're going to go to a close-up here.
Okay, so at the bottom of this image, we have one of the headstones, and you can see how anonymous it is. And I find it really sort of disconcerting. And then up at the top, I wrote, "I leave pennies for them in remembrance." And then on the leaves and on the branches, I put the different names. Sometimes we have their ages or their occupations. Mary Rogers, widow, age 25. Adam Dyer, laborer, age 22. Manson W. Barnard, age unknown. George G. Hallett, carpenter, age 31 years and 9 months. That's here.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to bring these folks, their names, back to the cemetery and reunite them. The reason that their names are not listed is because at the time to come down with smallpox was shameful. It was would bring shame to your family. It was something to be embarrassed about, on top of being incredibly scary and very lethal.
And so one thing too, I think, is that Eve and I, when Eve does her writing on her work, if you look in the field, you know, the writing is very simple in terms of the length. It's obviously not as complex as this. And the writing has to be legible from 35, 40 feet away from the road.
I would say that this work is very typical of the kind of work that we were doing up until we decided to make the transition to the drive-by artwork outside in our hayfield.
Right.
Much smaller text, much more comprehensive.
Yes.
And then going outside, everything had to go, you know, okay, very short, very big.
Yeah. Do you want to do another one down here?
I wanted to do one over here.
Oh, okay.
This is,
Can we go back to the hand camera?
Text about the pilgrims arriving.
Which one do you do, the
in
first
Cape Cod.
paragraph or second?
Why don't we do the first paragraph?
Oh, okay.
When the pilgrims arrived in Cape Cod, they were amazed to find a deserted Native American village with a sweet brook and plowed fields for corn. Even though they had arrived at this location by mistake, they had been expecting to arrive in Virginia. They took it as a sign of divine providence that God wanted them to settle here. What they could not have known was that the previous residents, the Wampanoag, had been decimated by European disease even before the Pilgrims' arrival, due to the presence of European whale hunters, fishermen, fur traders, and explorers, and more specifically, the rats on board their ships.
And why don't we read this last one over here too, since we're still zoomed in. I'm going to get down on my knees here because this is way on the ground. So this is really, sorry about that.
So this, I love this passage because it speaks to the title of the piece, A Wonderful Plague. By God's visitation reigned a wonderful plague. Ah, yes, wonderful. Here's a neat riddle. When is a plague not a plague? When it wipes out your enemies. A plague can be lovable, especially designed by the universe to erase those who frighten you, threaten you, call into question the very nature of your legitimate existence. Or maybe they just happen to be the owners of something you covet. Their deaths are thereby sanctioned, aren't they? Proof that your way of life is the right one, because the dead brought it on themselves through the cardinal sin of difference. God hates them. So one of the themes that I kept running into as we were working on this piece was the ongoing theme of power and control, and sort of who says what the meaning, who interprets for us what the meaning of a plague is, of a pandemic. Throughout history, there seems to be a pattern of people working pandemics to their advantage, using them for politics, for power, for gaining advantage for their particular view of the world. So I found this theme fascinating, and it recurs throughout the piece.
And one thing I'll talk too about the idea of documenting ourselves while we're working, and artists documenting themselves while they work, is that even I always make some sort of documentation that we share on our website about the works that we make.
So even though we feel that seeing works of art in person is the best way to see artwork, not everybody can come to Vermont, call it Vermont. So we make sure to put lots of documentation of the pieces, of their creation, and of the various stages of their presentation on the website, so people can enjoy them from all over. And
this particular piece, the movie, the documentary, A Wonderful Plague, really sort of started out as I had done a lot of documentation, making the work. You were doing it, and we realized very quickly, and Rick was very encouraging in this, that there was a larger piece that we could make here. There was a larger documentary on the work. And this is actually the largest documentary piece I think we've done today.
Well, and the movie that we made, you know, it started out as sort of just a video showing the piece and having me do readings from the piece to communicate the work, especially knowing that who's going to get to see this in person
during a pandemic?
When? Nobody, right? For the foreseeable future. So that's how the movie started. But then we kept adding things. You had some footage from your trip of you walking through the woods. And then we had, we were very grateful that Rick Cador was able to do
an essay and a voiceover.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, we had all this different stuff added in, and at the end it ends up being, you know, 20 some minutes long. And now we're thinking, okay, now the movie's sort of taken on a life of its own and could go lots of places that the artwork might not be appropriate for.
And I think this speaks a little bit about as working artists during an uncertain time like a pandemic, works like this, works like artwork in the field, you know, finding different ways to display our work and share our work
We've felt a real sense of urgency
Yeah.
about that, about the frustration of
Yep.
having things planned and having them canceled, of having things shut down. As an artist, showing your work is intrinsic to everything you do.
Yeah.
So how do we get around, you know, the obstacles that fall in your path?
Right.
And that's what we've been finding is that's an exciting journey even during uncertain times.
So I think, Rick, that's what we have to talk about the piece.
Do we want to maybe answer some questions?
Before we jump to
Yes.
questions and answers, we need to kind of change the orientation of the camera on the right.
Oh, okay. I wonder why that's the case. It must have got, it got bumped, I think.
And if you're playing the Collage Live Online drinking game that we set up in the first one, this would be a glitch that would count towards a...
Yeah, exactly.
Bingo.
Awesome.
You're vertical.
Is vertical okay?
Vertical is okay. And we have some questions from folks. So I'm going to pose the first one. We have a couple here. Llewellyn asks, are these created inside and installed outside or created outside?
The outside pieces are created inside. The largest piece that's 32 feet wide actually spans pretty much the entire width of our studio. So I'm building the pieces indoors. Eve is then painting on the pieces indoors. And then it's an entire day or 2 day process to
construct them outside.
Yeah, to build the framework.
We make the scaffolding. We erected. We put the artwork onto it.
Right.
That has to take place outside. But yeah.
And we pour a lot of concrete. The largest piece has almost 1,000 pounds of concrete in the ground to secure something that big for storms.
Still temporary though.
Still temporary.
And Clive Knights asks, did you consider framing them in other ways to further engage the setting in defining their edges?
In terms of outside?
I think so.
Yeah.
Clive, elaborate.
Well, I think outside, you know, we were looking for a way to display the pieces that was very contemporary and also very temporary.
Yes, and I think we were very interested in having a sense of immediacy.
Yeah.
And in particular, we were having this ongoing conversation / debate over whether or not we wanted to have sort of more finishing, like do we want to frame the pieces?
Right.
And my position was, no, that's being too finicky. I want them to feel more raw. So when you walk up to them, you can see the staple gun.
Yep.
You know, and I feel that that's appropriate for these pieces. They're sort of like kamikaze artworks, you know, and people are driving down the road and they're not expecting to see art and boom.
It's like an art ambush.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Patricia asks, are the outside pieces varnished and painted with polyethylene?
No, the outside pieces are printed on a special polyvinyl that I found that the moment the pigment's dry, you literally can dump it in a bucket of water for days, and the pigment is completely solid. The color pieces should easily last 4 to 6 months. The black and white pieces could last 6 months to a year outdoors. We also sighted them in such a way that, excuse me, that the sun only hits the surface of the artworks for a couple hours, like an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon.
Yes.
So it's only getting a small amount.
It's not getting direct sun all
right. And that was very
afternoon.
purposeful. They don't need to be varnished, and you were painting on them with acrylic paint.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's basically, you know, once it dries, it's basically plastic.
Right.
We have a question about the one of the works outside, and it's there's an embedded criticism in this question, but I'll read it from Lee Scriggins. Are you aware that a lot of Black Lives Matter folks and leaders of color might not feel that we are having the same color skin is desirable, and that erasing the experiences of people of color could be considered a white supremacist move? So I think Lee's asking about that tension where we're all the same color versus, wait a minute, we are having very different experiences based on our skin color and our race right now. And I think Lee's asking you to speak to that tension.
I think that's absolutely an excellent point. I think that tension is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not at all sure that there's any good answer here. I just really responded to this particular narrative that I heard. It wasn't a practical solution. It was not intended to be. I think it's extremely important as a white artist who lives in a culture that creates an invisibility for people of other colors, things that I am not seeing or aware of. I have to be very vigilant to always be open and listening to what those experiences are that I'm not having are like. And so I think that's an excellent point, and I'm very glad that you brought it up. I would not wish for everyone to be one color all the time and therefore erase people's racial identity. That is not what I was trying to propose.
We have another question back to material issues. Catherine asks about, do you consider sustainability issues when you create work?
Yes, in particular for the works that we make indoors, the larger pieces. You know, I work with National Living Treasures in Japan. We work with indigenous people all over the world, you know, making for the rare and handmade papers that we work with. In terms of the outdoor pieces, the material is actually recyclable when we're done. And everything else on the piece will be broken down and reused in one fashion or another. Especially with my wife writing the Year of No Garbage book, these are definitely conversations that we have.
All the time.
All the time.
So that's sort of a, you know, in my other life, I'm doing this project where our family is living for a year without any garbage. So we absolutely recycle or compost everything.
Yeah.
And so that is a very ever-present concern in our household.
And this is one of the things that's interesting about photography right now too, is that, you know, when we first started doing this project with Eve, you know, I sat back and took stock of my industry, of the film that I work with, the chemicals that I work with, the processes and the papers, 99% of which is sustainable, 99% of which is recyclable, reusable.
Surprisingly so.
Surprisingly so, actually.
More
and
than you would.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit of effort.
Another question from GE Vote. I wonder if you could speak to your process of how you work together. Do the images come first and then the text is inspired by the images, or do your conversations as you're working on the piece inspired both the text and the images?
I think that Eve and I like to refer to my photographs as the silent movie and her text as the soundtrack. Yeah. And so when we start a project, we'll talk about it a little bit, but she's always like, go shoot, go make the work. And then we come back, we look at the work, we edit the work.
Imagery always comes first,
yeah.
At least up till now.
Up to now.
We'll be talking about an idea, and Steve will go and do some shooting and see what comes from that.
Yeah.
Then those, you know, once he and I work to select the imagery, often we'll place it in a particular order that we really like. And then I will sort of meditate on the imagery. I'll do some research if that's appropriate. And then I'll come up with the text and come out here to our studio where we lay the pieces down on the floor. And that's when I start doing the painting. I do it freehand. That's another question that I often
Or even
get.
on the other pieces too, when you're working on the pieces like this that you're writing directly on.
Yeah.
I should point out that it took us 23 years of marriage to feel comfortable really working this way.
So we met in a photography program, both making art. After we graduated, Steve continued to make photographic artwork, and I went off down the road of writing and have been writing in various formats ever since. It's only in the last year and a half that we've been collaborating together where the words and the imagery
But having now said this, there have been times that I'll be downstairs in the studio working and Eve's upstairs writing on work, and I'll come upstairs and I'll go, what are you doing? Because once again, this is all about trust. There was one time that we were doing a piece called, it was The Three Girls up at the lake in northern Vermont. I can't think of the title right now, but Eve was scratching her leg while she was writing on it, and all of a sudden her leg starts to bleed, and she sticks her thumb in the blood and then sticks it dead center in this artwork in the sun. And I come upstairs and I'm like, what are you doing? And what I realize is
Bleeding
that
on the artwork.
the trust that I think we have for each other makes all of this, I think, better. I'm always excited about to see what she's going to do to the work. And I very much look at the words that she puts on the piece, like not only just the words that are going to fire that visual, that part of your brain, but also they become textures and contours and leading lines throughout the surface of the photograph. And I just find the whole working back and forth very exciting.
And another aspect that we haven't talked about very much, but that I'm very excited by, is when we watch people engage with the artwork, especially with the indoor works where the words are smaller. People frequently will come up to a work and not realize that there's any writing on it at first. And then as they approach, you can see them start to figure out that there's words, and then they get closer, and then they go up and they start going around the work, and the relationship changes. And I love watching that progression and seeing that dynamic that is it's very active, and it's very different than I think in our work previously.
Well, I think also, if you look at the way Eve writes on the pieces, and you can see this if you go to our website and watch the videos, they're not just written in linear lines. She's writing all over the place, upside down and high and low. And it's a very physical engagement with the work that I love. You know, people come to the work seeing it simply from this visual standpoint. Then they see the words, that part of their brain turns on. It's this very physical, in a lot of cases, long engagement. Some of the pieces people spend 20, 30 minutes with, reading and engaging, and then they step back. And it's interesting having conversations with people then, because I feel like they've had this full experience of the work that you don't get.
It changes.
It does.
I love the fact that it occurs over time and encourages people to spend more time with the work.
I want to pose 3 more questions. So we're, and then we'll be timing to wrap up a bit. But one is Sherry Gaines asks, how are you encouraging, inviting people to view the works outside?
We have several ways that we're doing that. First off, you can drive by our field at any time and see the work. We've made the work large enough and big enough that you don't need to get out of your car. If you want to simply drive by.
If you want to just drive by, if you have mobility concerns, if you're worried about,
if it's really hot
isolation,
and you don't want to be outside,
you can see the whole thing from the road. However, we do have a parking area. We have a walking path. People are encouraged to park. It's free. It's open to the public all the time. And we've done a lot of promotion, both on the web and in print.
And in TV.
We've been fortunate to have excellent coverage. We have examples of all of this from different television stations coming and talking to us and showcasing the work, both locally and nationally. So it's been wonderful. And as a result, we've had people showing up and telling us that they've traveled a couple hours to see this, which is extremely gratifying.
I think you guys are being humble. I mean, you've received national media attention for presenting this work.
We've been very, very fortunate. Which is, as any artist will tell you, having people respond to your work, especially now, when everything is so shut down, it's so meaningful. We'll be sitting up at the house and I'll hear a car drive by and they honk. If I see someone out there in the field and I'm not doing anything at that minute, I'll go out and I greet people and we talk to people and engage.
And there seems to be a real sense of I do feel that because of this unusual period of time, people are more expressive and saying, thank you for doing this. And that just is incredibly.
Well, because this really started out as a love letter to our community, to our state, to our friends.
Exactly. This is something we did, and we didn't want anything but to present it to the community in hopes that it would be a wonderful thing that people would come and enjoy.
If you put a number on it, how much percentage of your time do you spend making art versus promoting art?
Ooh.
Okay, so do we give the right answer or the Rick answer? We've had this conversation before. I would say that we spend actually a lot of time promoting our work in the business of our work.
I think the more we learn, the more time we spend on it.
I think when you're young and you're making work, you think it's important just to make work, and somehow magically you'll be seen and famous and it'll happen. And after 30 years,
what'd you say, 50-50?
I would say we work more 60-40 now.
Which one?
Promotion. 60% promotion online.
I think that's very fair to say.
And 40% is actually making. And we've been working long enough now that when we get excited to make something, it's just this attack of going to make the work. But then a lot of the work is, now you've made this work, but are people going to be able to see it? How do you get it out there? And I think every month we spend more and more time doing that.
Realizing that that's key.
It really is key.
Catherine asks, as an artist, how do you relate to the issue of wanting your work to last beyond your lifetime, and yet if it is impermanent and sustainable, it is part of your legacy is gone? This work is ephemeral, right? So.
Oh yeah.
That's a really good question.
So cocktails help at 5. I will say that I come from a classic darkroom background. I mean, when I went to RIT, it was large format, black and white, gelatin, silver, and the idea of the stuff would last generations upon generations. And the works that we make throughout the studio, I mean, are designed, the carbon pigments, they're designed to last just generations upon generations.
And I'm the kind of person, I'm like this in every aspect of my life. That's why I'm a clutter person. For my second book, I talked about, holding on to things. I expect my car to run forever. I expect every appliance I ever buy to run forever. I certainly expect all the artworks to be around forever. So this is a hard concept for me to sort of digest.
And the pieces in the studio, when we say, I mean, another thing that I think is important, I don't think we've mentioned, is that all the work that we make is a one of a kind. I don't believe in doing editions or making multiple copies. So this is the only copy of A Wonderful Plague that'll ever exist.
Right.
All the artwork in the field, the piece at the Bennington Museum, that's the only copy that'll exist. So what we're doing is we're taking really, really, really great documenting the work.
Well, so we're inspired by artists such as Krista.
Right. Documenting the pieces
who had
and having
temporary work and did excellent documentary, and that's what lives on.
But having said all that, I will tell you, like when we were just walking through the field and I'm looking at some of these pieces and I'm really excited, I do get that little gut punch of,
twinge.
But it won't be there in January and it'll never be there again. That is definitely...
So it's very, I think it's a double-edged sword. It's very, very freeing.
It's exciting.
In a lot of ways. It's, it opens up a whole lot, but there's also a sadness there too.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What advice do you have for collage artists who want to move in this direction with their own art practice? Recognizing
the direction of big or?
Working bigger, working out in their own community. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the same scale as what you're working on, but at one point you were artists who made work that went into frames that then went into a gallery, right? And now you're thinking much more broader and more spectacle. You think of the curatorial impact and how to get it out to the community. How'd you make that jump?
The pandemic helped an awful lot.
I think we felt forced.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about doing
but
this
forced in a good way.
Yeah, this was really, I mean, if anybody who knows me knows that the grass never grows under my feet. I am always engaged and moving and thinking about the next thing.
Yes.
And the pandemic shut all of that down.
And all that energy had to go somewhere.
Yeah, or she was going to kill me. And so making these big pieces, it was that push. And it's funny, years ago, I used to, like most photographers, I would make editions that were larger, you know, editions of 10 or 7 or 3. And eventually Eve came to me and she said, why not just make one of a kind?
Well, you're a very prolific
But
artist.
it was that push that you did was very freeing. And it's that sort of jumping, not only jumping out of your creative circle, but taking that creative leap of faith. And that was one of the best decisions I ever did, of going one of a kind. Making these artworks outside, while it was terrifying and while they're temporary, and there's a lot of things about that as a photographer I find unnerving, I find it so unbelievably rewarding. I mean, I recently made another piece in a different series in sort of this process, and I'm enjoying it. But I have to tell you, there's something really captivating about making work for the outdoors, something that people are going to engage with, not in a perfect setting, but in the real world.
And I love that they are people who may not consider themselves to be art people or people who go to museums on a regular basis. It's out there. And if you're walking down our road or biking down our road, you're going to engage with it on some level or other. And I love that sort of dynamic of getting it to a new community. So if I were to give one piece of advice, I would say, for us, there was a lot of, on both our parts, some fear, and we had each other to go, it's okay. We should do this. We're going to do this. And, you know, me getting that paintbrush out and painting on his work for the first time in giant acrylic paint was very scary.
And engaging with our community,
and
engaging with our town. How are they going to respond?
Digging holes and putting this up, and people driving by and we're like, oh boy, how are people going to react to this? Are people going to deface it? You know, are we going to get a letter from the town? Answer, yes.
We did.
So,
but I think
but don't be afraid. If you've got an idea you're excited about, pursue it. That would, you know, push through.
I'm a big believer in failure is the best way to grow and to learn. And I feel constantly as an artist, I feel constantly in the processes and the way that I'm pushing myself and my materials. And so I truly look at what's happening in the field as a lab, as an experiment. And each one has been a little better. I think that's one of the most important things too, is give yourself permission to fail, give yourself permission to learn from your mistakes, and then just keep going and keep making.
Well, thank you for hosting us today. Thank you for getting your entire family behind cameras. Thank you to Ilsa and Steve and Chris Kurtz and Chris Byrne, who helped, you know, bring this event together so that we could share this time and space. We're going to end the formal session. We will leave the chat open for about 15, 20 minutes, or as people are hanging out. Our next Collage Live event will be, we're going to be joining the Collage Street crew to talk about public space, street art, and collage. And that's going to be on Thursday, July 30th. And I hope to see everyone who is here today there. And check the website for details. Also, check out the link to, we'll put it up again, the Book to the Wonderful Plague book and the Collage Live program book. And I have this wonderful set of Jinsu knives that I try to share with you. But thank you everyone for showing up today. Thank you again, EveNSteve, for being such wonderful hosts. And we're all going to shut down our video. We'll leave the chat open a bit. And have a wonderful Saturday, everybody. Hope to see you again soon.
Take care, everybody.